a healthy little one.
Oh, so tiny.
A miracle
Carolyn
indeed.
Moline learned
My
to be
sweet
invisible
baby.
when she was 7 years old. That was the year Elizabeth was born, perfect, pink, and screaming with a kind of robust health that made the midwives clap their hands in delight. That was the year their mother died, her last breath spent whispering Elizabeth's name like a prayer. And that was the year Jenkins Moline looked at his surviving daughters and made a choice about which one mattered. It wasn't Carolyn. For 17 years after that, Carolyn perfected the art of not being seen. She moved through the Moline estate like a ghost, managing the household accounts her father ignored, ensuring Elizabeth's gowns were pressed and her jewelry polished, standing in corners during social gatherings while her sister sparkled in candlelight. She learned that survival meant silence, that safety lived in shadows, that the world had decided she was the plain one, the competent one, the one who existed to make Elizabeth shine brighter by comparison. She learned to watch, to listen, to read the currents of power and politics in every conversation, every glance, every strategic marriage proposal that arrived for her sister. She became a scholar of human nature by necessity, because when you're invisible, observation is your only currency. And then Alpha King Bradley Lynn came to their estate seeking a political alliance. Jenkins didn't hesitate. He presented Elizabeth like a prize merit auction, listing her accomplishments and beauty marks while Carolyn stood in the shadows by the doorway, holding a tray of wine glasses no one would take from her hands because servants are supposed to be invisible too. "Take the pretty one," Jenkins said, his hand on Elizabeth's shoulder, his smile broad and confident. "She'll make a magnificent Luna. Perfect bloodlines, impeccable training, and as you can see, the beauty to represent your pack with distinction." The room held its breath, waiting for the inevitable acceptance. Bradley Lynn stood in the center of the great hall like a mountain given flesh and will, 6 feet 6 inches of controlled power, with dark hair shot through with premature silver and eyes the color of winter storms. His presence filled the space so completely that even the candles seemed to burn differently in his proximity, their flames bending toward him like subjects bowing before a king. His gaze swept the room with the methodical precision of a predator cataloging prey. It passed over Elizabeth, beautiful Elizabeth with her golden hair and practiced smile. It passed over Jenkins, whose confidence was already beginning to curdle into confusion. It moved across the assembled nobles and servants, dismissing each in turn. And then it found Carolyn, standing in the shadows, holding a tray, dressed in a simple gray dress that was chosen specifically to help her disappear. Her dark hair pulled back severely, her face bare of cosmetics, her posture designed to take up as little space as possible. Bradley Lynn's eyes locked onto hers, and Carolyn felt the impact like a physical blow. For the first time in 17 years, someone truly saw her. The silence stretched. Jenkins cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, I said you should take her." The word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water, rippling outward until it touched every shocked face in the room. Bradley Lynn's arm extended, one finger pointing directly at Carolyn with absolute certainty. "That one. Carolyn Moline. She will be my Luna." The tray fell from Carolyn's hands. Crystal shattered against marble. Wine spread across the floor like spilled blood. And in the chaos of sound and motion that followed, one truth became crystalline and terrifying. The invisible daughter had just been chosen by the most powerful alpha in the realm. The rejected sister was about to become queen. And absolutely nothing about her carefully constructed survival strategy had prepared her for this. What did the Alpha King see in the shadows that no one else could? Why choose the overlooked daughter when the perfect one stood in the light? And what trials awaited a woman who'd survived by being invisible, now thrust into the brightest spotlight in the kingdom? What happens when the invisible daughter is suddenly chosen by the most powerful alpha in the realm? Why did Bradley Lynn reject the beautiful sister everyone expected him to choose? And what brutal trials await a woman who survived through observation and silence, now forced to lead a pack that sees her as a mistake. If you want to discover why intelligence is more dangerous than beauty, why the quiet ones are the most powerful, and what happens when someone finally sees the invisible daughter for who she truly is, subscribe now, because this story rewards patience, punishes assumptions, and will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about power. The Moline estate sits on the edge of the Leakin territories like a monument to faded glory. Once, 2 generations ago, the family name meant something: wealth, influence, a seat at the council tables where pack politics were decided. Now it means desperation disguised as dignity, maintained through strategic marriages and careful management of dwindling resources. Carolyn knows every crack in the estate's facade because she's the one who patches them. While Jenkins drinks expensive wine he can't afford and Elizabeth attends social functions designed to attract wealthy suitors, Carolyn negotiates with merchants, manages the household budget, and ensures the servants are paid even when Jenkins forgets. She does this from the shadows. Always from the shadows. The great hall where Bradley Lynn makes his choice is a perfect microcosm of Carolyn's existence. The room is designed to showcase Elizabeth, the candles positioned to catch her golden hair, the seating arranged so she's framed by ancestral portraits of beautiful Moline women, even the refreshments chosen to complement her complexion. Carolyn's position is by the door, ready to serve and disappear, dressed in a color specifically chosen not to draw attention. This is normal, expected, the natural order of their household. Which is why Bradley's choice detonates like an explosion in the center of their carefully maintained illusion. Absolutely not. Jenkins's voice rises to a pitch Carolyn has rarely heard, the sound of a desperate man watching his carefully laid plans disintegrate. Your Majesty, there's been some mistake. She's not suitable for. Are you questioning my judgment? Bradley's voice doesn't rise, but the temperature in the room seems to drop 10 degrees. His eyes, storm gray and utterly unreadable, remain fixed on Carolyn with an intensity that makes her want to sink through the floor. No, Your Majesty, of course not, but Jenkins scrambles for purchase on his collapsing strategy. Carolyn has no training for court life. She manages the household. She's useful in her way, but Elizabeth has been groomed since childhood to be a Luna. She knows protocol, politics, social graces. I don't need a politician, Bradley interrupts. I need a Luna. There's a difference. The words hang in the air, cryptic and absolute. Elizabeth, to her credit, maintains her composure even as her carefully practiced smile develops hairline cracks. Your Majesty, I'm honored by your presence, and I'm certain my sister is as well. Perhaps if you spent time with both of us, you might. I've already decided. Bradley turns to face Elizabeth fully for the first time, and Carolyn sees something flicker in his expression. Not cruelty, but a kind of clinical assessment. You're exactly what you appear to be. Beautiful, well-trained, a perfect political asset. He pauses. I don't need an asset. I need someone who sees. His gaze returns to Carolyn, pinning her in place. Approach. It's a command, not a request. Carolyn's body responds before her mind catches up, years of obedience to authority overriding her paralysis. She steps forward, her movements careful and measured, acutely aware of every eye in the room tracking her progress. She stops 3 feet from the Alpha King, close enough to see the silver threading through his dark hair, close enough to smell leather and pine, and something wild that makes her instincts scream both danger and fascination. Look at me, Bradley orders. Carolyn has spent 17 years avoiding direct eye contact with powerful people, looking down, looking away, making herself small and unthreatening. Every survival instinct she possesses tells her to obey that pattern now. But he asked, and something in his voice suggests that disobedience would be worse than discomfort. She lifts her eyes and meets his gaze. The impact is immediate and overwhelming. His eyes aren't just gray, they're layered storms, complex and constantly shifting. And in them, Carolyn sees something she's never experienced before, genuine interest. Not in what she can do for him, not in how she can be useful, but in who she is beneath the carefully constructed invisibility. "Why do you stand in the shadows?" Bradley asks, his voice pitched low enough that only she can hear. The honest answer would take hours to explain. Carolyn settles for a fragment of truth. Because it's safer. Safer than what? Than being seen. Something that might be satisfaction flickers across Bradley's face. "And yet you see everything, don't you? From those shadows. You watch. You listen. You understand currents of power that people in the light miss entirely." It's not a question, but Carolyn nods anyway, her heart hammering against her ribs. "That's why I chose you," Bradley says, and now his voice carries to the entire room. Intelligence over beauty. Observation over performance. Survival instincts over social graces. He pauses, and when he speaks again, his tone carries the weight of absolute authority. "Carolyn Moline, you will come with me to the Shadowpine Citadel. You will undergo the traditional trials for those who would be Luna. And if you survive them, you will stand beside me as queen." The word "if" echoes like a death knell. "And if I refuse?" Carolyn asks, her voice steadier than she expects. Bradley's smile is sharp enough to draw blood. "You won't." "How can you be certain?" "Because refusing means returning to this." His gesture encompasses the great hall, Jenkins's red face, Elizabeth's brittle composure, the invisible cage Carolyn has lived in for 17 years. "And you're far too intelligent to choose a cage when someone's offering you a throne." He's right, and they both know it. Carolyn takes a breath that feels like jumping off a cliff. "What are these trials?" "Tests of worth," Bradley says. "The hunt, where you'll prove you can survive the wild without pack protection. The gauntlet, where you'll demonstrate leadership intelligence. The feast of faces, where you'll navigate court politics with every noble in the realm watching for weakness." He leans slightly closer. "They're designed to be brutal. Most candidates fail at least one. Some fail all three. And if I fail, then you return here, and I choose someone else." But the way he says it suggests failure means something worse than simple rejection. Carolyn looks around the room one final time, at her father, whose plans have collapsed into fury and confusion, at Elizabeth, whose perfect composure is finally cracking, at the estate that's been her prison disguised as home for her entire life. She thinks about 17 years of invisibility, of competence rewarded with more work and less recognition, of watching from corners while others lived in light, of becoming so good at being unseen that she almost forgot she existed at all. And she thinks about storm gray eyes that saw her anyway. "I accept," Carolyn says, her voice clear and certain. Bradley nods once, as if he never doubted her answer. "We leave at dawn. Bring nothing. Everything you need will be provided." He turns and walks toward the door, his guards falling into formation around him. At the threshold, he pauses and looks back at Carolyn with an expression she can't quite read. "One more thing," he says. "Stop hiding. Starting now." Then he's gone, and Carolyn stands in the center of the great hall, no longer invisible, no longer safe, no longer the rejected sister standing in shadows. The invisible daughter has been seen, and there's no going back. Dawn arrives cold and gray, mist clinging to the ground like ghosts refusing to release their hold on the earth. Carolyn stands in the courtyard of the Moline estate with nothing but the dress she's wearing and a certainty that feels equal parts terrifying and liberating. She slept perhaps 2 hours, her mind refusing to quiet even as exhaustion dragged at her bones. The night was filled with Jenkins's furious demands that she refuse, Elizabeth's wounded silence, and Carolyn's own internal war between fear and something that might be hope but feels too dangerous to name. Bradley's convoy arrives precisely at sunrise. 6 carriages flanked by lichens in wolf form, massive creatures that make the estate's guard dogs look like puppets. The Alpha King himself rides a black horse that seems too large to be natural, its eyes intelligent and unsettling. He dismounts with fluid grace and approaches Carolyn where she waits, alone because Jenkins refused to see her off and Elizabeth locked herself in her chambers. No tearful farewells. Bradley observes, though his tone suggests he already knows the answer. I don't think I'll be missed, Carolyn says honestly. Their loss. Bradley gestures to the lead carriage. We have a 3 days journey to the Citadel. Use them to prepare yourself mentally. The trials begin the day after we arrive. Carolyn climbs into the carriage, which is far more luxurious than anything she's experienced. Velvet seats, silk curtains, and a scent of leather and cedar that she's beginning to associate with the Alpha King himself. She expects Bradley to ride separately, but he follows her inside, settling into the seat across from her with the kind of casual authority that makes the spacious carriage feel suddenly intimate. You'll have questions, he says as the convoy begins to move. Ask them now, while we're private. Once we reach the Citadel, every word you speak will be analyzed. Carolyn has approximately 800 questions, but she starts with the most pressing. Why did you really choose me? I told you. Intelligence over. No, Carolyn interrupts, surprised by her own boldness. That's the answer you gave them. I want the real reason. Bradley studies her for a long moment, and Carolyn has the unsettling sensation of being examined by something that sees far more than human eyes should. 3 months ago, I attended a gathering at the Ashford estate. Your father was there, presenting Elizabeth to every eligible alpha within 50 miles. You were there too, standing against the wall in a gray dress, holding a tray of drinks. Carolyn barely remembers that night. She'd served drinks, managed a crisis, when 2 rival alphas nearly came to blows and disappeared before anyone noticed her. I watched you, Bradley continues, prevent a political incident through nothing but strategic placement and perfect timing. You moved an alpha's drink 6 inches to the left, which forced him to turn his body away from his rival. You whispered something to a serving girl, who then spilled wine on a noble lady's dress at precisely the moment said lady was about to insult another pack's representative. In 30 minutes, you diffused 3 potential conflicts, and not a single person in that room noticed except me. Carolyn's breath catches. She remembers those interventions, the careful calculations required to prevent disasters without drawing attention. That's when I knew, Bradley says quietly, that I needed someone who understands power the way you do. Not the obvious kind, the kind that announces itself and demands recognition. The subtle kind. The kind that moves pieces on a board no one else knows they're playing on. What game are we playing? Carolyn asks, her voice barely above a whisper. The oldest one, Bradley replies. Survival. There are forces in my pack, in the alliance of packs, who would see me weakened or removed. They move carefully in shadows, using politics instead of claws. I need a Luna who can see them, who can operate in the dark the way they do, who has survived her entire life by being invisible and therefore knows how invisibility works. You need a spy, Carolyn says flatly. I need a partner who understands that power has nothing to do with being seen and everything to do with seeing. Bradley leans forward slightly. The trials aren't just tests of your worth, Carolyn. They're tests of whether you can survive what's coming. Because if you become my Luna, every hidden enemy I have will target you. And I need to know you can handle it. The weight of what he's saying settles over Carolyn like a heavy cloak. He didn't choose her despite her invisibility. He chose her because of it. Because 17 years of standing in shadows taught her to see what others miss. Because survival by observation is exactly the skill he needs. It should feel manipulative. Instead, it feels like the first time anyone has ever valued her for what she actually is rather than what she fails to be. What if I fail the trials? Carolyn asks. Bradley's expression hardens. Then you weren't what I thought you were, and we both move on. But something in his eyes suggests the truth is more complicated. That failure might mean more than simple disappointment. The conversation shifts to less dangerous territory as the day progresses. Protocol at the Citadel. Key political players Carolyn should know. The structure of the pack hierarchy. Bradley is a patient teacher, answering her questions without condescension, occasionally testing her comprehension with hypothetical scenarios. Carolyn finds herself relaxing incrementally, her natural analytical mind engaging with the challenge of learning a completely new political ecosystem. This, at least, is familiar territory, watching, learning, finding patterns in chaos. As night falls and they stop at a way station to rest, Bradley pauses at the door to Carolyn's assigned chamber. "One warning," he says, his voice low and serious. "The trials are public. Every success and every failure will be witnessed by the pack. Some will want you to succeed. They'll see you as proof that worth matters more than birth. Others will want you to fail spectacularly, to prove that someone like you has no business aspiring to Luna." "And you?" Carolyn asks. "What do you want?" "I want you to be exactly who you are," Bradley says. "The woman who sees everything. Don't try to be Elizabeth. Don't try to be what you think a Luna should be. Be the invisible daughter who survived 17 years in the shadows. That's the only chance you have." The Shadowpine Citadel rises from the mountains like a fong of black stone, its towers reaching toward heavy clouds that promise snow. It's beautiful in a harsh, uncompromising way, no softness, no decoration, just raw power-made architecture. Carolyn has one night in the Citadel before the trials begin. She's given chambers that are far too grand for someone who hasn't earned the title of Luna yet. All dark wood and fir throws and windows that overlook a forest so dense it looks like solid shadow. A woman arrives to brief her on the first trial. She introduces herself as Isla, the pack's headkeeper, and her eyes assess Carolyn with the clinical precision of someone cataloging weaknesses. The hunt takes place in the Witherwood, 10 square miles of old forest, dangerous terrain, and predators both animal and political. Isla explains, her tone brisk. "You'll be released at dawn with nothing but basic clothing. Your task is to survive until sunset and return to the Citadel alive. Most candidates have their wolves to help them, enhance senses, speed, strength. You don't." "I'm aware," Carolyn says quietly. "Are you aware that the last 3 human candidates didn't survive the hunt?" Isla's question is sharp. 2 were killed by actual predators. 1 was killed by a Leakin who decided she wasn't worthy and removed the problem. Ice slides down Carolyn's spine. "That's allowed. The hunt has one rule: survive. How others choose to interpret, that is their business." Isla's expression softens fractionally. "The Alpha King chose you for reasons I don't understand. But I've seen enough candidates to know when someone is in over their head. You're intelligent. I can see that. Use it. Because your physical strength and lack of supernatural abilities put you at a profound disadvantage." After Isla leaves, Carolyn stands at her window and stares into the Witherwood. Somewhere in that darkness, she'll have to survive for 12 hours while lichens and predators hunt. While people who want her to fail engineer her death. She should be terrified. And she is. But underneath the fear runs a thread of something else. Determination forged from 17 years of survival, of being underestimated, of finding ways to endure when the odds were stacked against her. She didn't survive Jenkins and Elizabeth by being strong. She survived by being smart, by watching, by understanding systems and finding the cracks in them. The Witherwood is a system, and every system has cracks. Carolyn spends the night preparing mentally. Sleep is impossible anyway, so she uses the time to think through scenarios, plan contingencies, remind herself that observation is her weapon and patience is her armor. Dawn arrives gray and cold. Carolyn is escorted to the edge of the Witherwood by guards who don't speak to her, their expressions suggesting they don't expect to see her alive again. A crowd has gathered, pack members, nobles, servants, all waiting to watch the invisible daughter attempt something she has no business attempting. Bradley stands at the front of the crowd, his face an unreadable mask. He doesn't offer encouragement or comfort. This is her trial to face alone. A horn sounds. Carolyn steps into the witherwood. The forest swallows her immediately. The tree canopy blocks so much light that it feels like dusk rather than dawn, and the silence is oppressive. No birds, no insects, just the whisper of wind through dead branches and her own careful footsteps. Carolyn forces herself to stop and think rather than run. Running is what prey does, and prey gets caught. She needs to be something else. She needs to be invisible. The first hour passes in careful reconnaissance. Carolyn moves slowly, using techniques she learned from watching, stepping on rocks instead of leaves, staying low, choosing paths that offer cover. She finds a stream and follows it, knowing water means life and life means resources. She also knows water means predators. But hiding from danger isn't the goal, surviving it is. The attack comes at the 2-hour mark. A mountain cat, massive and silent, drops from a tree branch directly in her path. Carolyn freezes, every instinct screaming to run, knowing that running triggers chase instinct and she cannot outrun a predator. She makes herself small, averts her eyes, removes herself as a threat while simultaneously removing herself as interesting prey. The cat watches her, golden eyes calculating. Carolyn can see the moment it decides she's not worth the effort. Too still, too small, offering no challenge and therefore no satisfaction. It turns and melts back into the forest. Carolyn's legs shake so badly she has to sit down for 5 full minutes before she can continue. But she's alive. And she's learned something. Invisibility works on predators too. The second attack is different. It comes from a lichen in wolf form, a massive gray creature that steps out of the shadows with clear intention. This isn't accidental. This is targeted. The Alpha King made a mistake choosing you, the wolf says, its voice rough and barely human. I'm correcting it. Carolyn recognizes the voice. Lord Ashford, one of the nobles who openly opposed Bradley's choice. He's larger than her in wolf form, faster, stronger. In a physical confrontation, she loses in seconds. So, she doesn't engage in a physical confrontation. You're right, Carolyn says, her voice steady despite her terror. He made a terrible mistake. I'm completely unqualified. Weak. Pathetic. Everything you've said about me is true. Ashford's wolf pauses, clearly not expecting agreement. Which makes me wonder, Carolyn continues, why you're wasting your energy on me. If I'm so obviously unworthy, the trials will eliminate me naturally. But if you kill me, you make me a martyr. You make Bradley look like he was right to choose me because I was so threatening that you had to remove me illegally. She pauses. You're smarter than that, Lord Ashford. You know that letting me fail publicly serves your purposes better than killing me in secret. The calculation is clear in Ashford's eyes. He wants her dead, but he wants the political win more. You have until sunset, he growls. After that, the hunt ends and you're protected. But if you're still in these woods when darkness falls. He doesn't finish the threat. He disappears into the forest, leaving Carolyn alone and shaking with the adrenaline crash of a confrontation survived through words instead of weapons. The rest of the hunt passes in a blur of careful movement and constant vigilance. Carolyn finds a hollow tree and rests for 2 hours, emerging only when she's certain the path ahead is clear. She avoids 3 more potential threats, a pack of wild dogs, a lichen who watches her from a distance but doesn't engage, and a section of forest that smells wrong in a way her human senses can't quite identify, but her instincts scream to avoid. When the sun finally begins its descent toward the horizon, Carolyn heads back toward the citadel. She's exhausted, filthy, covered in scratches from branches and bruises from falls, but she's alive. She emerges from the witherwood as the last rays of sunlight paint the sky orange and red. The crowd that gathered to watch her enter has grown larger. They stare in silence as she walks forward, clearly shocked that she's returning at all. Bradley steps forward, his expression still unreadable. You survived. I did, Carolyn says, her voice hoarse from disuse and dehydration.
How?
Carolyn looks at the assembled pack, at the nobles who wanted her dead, at the servants who expected her to fail. She thinks about Lord Ashford hiding somewhere in that crowd, angry that his prey escaped through wit instead of strength. I stayed invisible, she says quietly, until it served me to be seen. Something that might be satisfaction flickers across Bradley's face. The first trial is complete. You have 3 days to recover before the gauntlet. As Carolyn is escorted back to her chambers, she catches sight of a figure at the edge of the crowd, someone in a hooded cloak who wasn't there when she entered the forest. They nod once, a gesture of acknowledgement or approval, then disappears before Carolyn can see their face. The first trial is complete. But Carolyn has the distinct feeling that the real test is only just beginning. So Carolyn just survived being hunted by lichens, mountain cats, and political enemies using nothing but her brain and 17 years of practice being invisible, and now there's a mysterious hooded figure nodding at her like she just passed some secret test nobody told her about. This woman is out here playing 4D chess, while everyone else is playing checkers. If you want to see what happens when intelligence meets impossible odds, and trust me, the next trial makes the hunt look like a warm-up, subscribe now because Carolyn's just getting started, and it's about to get so much more complicated. Recovery is a luxury Carolyn barely experiences. Her body needs rest, but her mind won't grant it. She lies in her chambers replaying every moment of the hunt, analyzing what worked and what nearly killed her, preparing for trials she can't predict because she doesn't know enough about pack dynamics to anticipate them. On the second day, a servant arrives with a package. Inside is a leather-bound journal and a note written in handwriting Carolyn doesn't recognize. You see patterns others miss. Document what you observe. The gauntlet requires understanding, not strength. Trust your instincts. Trust what you know. A friend. There's no signature. No indication of who sent it. Carolyn examines the journal carefully, checking for poison or traps or any of the 1,000 ways a gift could be a weapon. It's clean. Just paper and leather and empty pages waiting to be filled. She starts writing. Observations about the Citadel's power structure. Notes on which nobles defer to whom in conversations. Patterns in servant behavior that suggest hidden alliances or resentments. The journal becomes a map of invisible currents, the kind of information Carolyn has been gathering instinctively her entire life, but never formalized. It helps. Turning observation into documentation makes her feel less powerless, more prepared. On the morning of the third day, Isla arrives to brief her on the gauntlet. This trial tests leadership intelligence, Isla explains, her tone slightly less hostile than before. Perhaps the hunt earned Carolyn a grudging respect. You'll be presented with 3 scenarios involving pack conflicts. Your task is to mediate, resolve, and demonstrate that you understand pack dynamics well enough to lead. Are these real conflicts? Carolyn asks. Very real. The people involved have genuine grievances. Your decisions will have actual consequences.
Isla pauses.
Previous candidates have tried to use dominance, aggression, or traditional alpha tactics. Most failed because they didn't understand that leadership isn't about being the strongest. It's about seeing what others need and finding solutions that serve the pack, not personal pride. It's the most helpful thing Isla has said, and Carolyn files it away carefully. The gauntlet takes place in the Great Hall of the Citadel, with the entire pack assembled to watch. Carolyn stands at the center while Bradley observes from his throne, his expression neutral. The first conflict is presented, 2 families disputing territory rights to a valuable hunting ground. Both have legitimate historical claims. Both have members willing to fight to the death over the perceived insult of losing. The family's representatives, a man named Thomas Redfield and a woman named Miriam Blackwood, stand on opposite sides of Carolyn, their hostility palpable. State your cases, Carolyn says, keeping her voice calm and authoritative. Thomas goes first, laying out a claim based on ancestral use and historical precedent. Miriam counters with legal documentation showing her family purchased rights to the land 3 generations ago. They're both right. They're both wrong. And they both hate each other enough that compromise feels impossible. Carolyn listens. Really listens. Not just to their words, but to what's beneath them. Thomas's pride is wounded. His family has always hunted those grounds, and losing them feels like losing identity. Miriam's security is threatened. Her family paid good money for legal rights, and having them challenged feels like theft. You're both defending something important, Carolyn says slowly. Thomas, you're defending tradition and family legacy. Miriam, you're defending legal rights and investment. Both of those things matter. Both deserve protection. So, what's your solution? Thomas demands. We can't both have exclusive rights.
No, Caroline Gris.
But you can share. The room erupts in protests. Sharing is a weakness. Sharing is surrender. Sharing isn't how pacts work. Carolyn waits for the noise to die down. The hunting ground is large enough for both families to use without interfering with each other. Thomas's family hunts at dawn. I've seen them. Miriam's family prefers dusk. Create a schedule. Thomas's family has morning rights. Miriam's family has evening rights. You both get access. You both preserve what's important to you. And you both prove to the pack that cooperation makes us stronger than conflict. Silence. Then Thomas says slowly, that could work. Miriam nods reluctantly. If he agrees to respect the boundaries. I do, Thomas says. It's not perfect, but it's functional. And it serves the pack instead of egos. The second conflict is more complex. A young Leakin named David has been caught stealing food from the pack stores. The law says theft is punishable by exile or worse. But David's family is starving because his father was injured in a hunting accident and can't work. The pack's head of security, a granite-faced woman named Commander Sterling, presents the case. The law is clear. Theft cannot be tolerated. Why was David's family starving? Carolyn asks. Sterling blinks, clearly not expecting the question. His father was injured. Yes, but why weren't they being supported by the pack? Isn't that the point of pack structure? That we care for our own? Uncomfortable shifting in the crowd. Sterling's jaw tightens. The support systems exist, but David's father refused to ask for help.
Fride.
So we're going to exile a young man for stealing food to feed his family, when the real problem is that our support systems failed because they require people to humble themselves by asking? Carolyn's voice hardens. That's not justice. That's bureaucracy masquerading as law. She turns to face the assembled pack. David broke the law. He should face consequences. But exile is disproportionate when the underlying problem is systemic failure. I propose David performs community service, working in the pack stores he stole from, helping to distribute food to families in need. He makes amends through action. His family gets the support they should have had from the beginning. And we fix the system so pride isn't a barrier to survival. Bradley leans forward slightly on his throne, his expression still neutral, but his attention absolute. Commander Sterling looks like she wants to argue, but several pack members are nodding. The solution addresses the crime while acknowledging the systemic failure that created it. David, Carolyn says, looking at the young man who's been standing with his head down throughout the proceeding. Do you accept these terms? Yes, he says immediately. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Don't apologize to me. Carolyn interrupts gently. Apologize to your pack by proving you can contribute more than you take. The third conflict is the most dangerous. Two alphas whose families have been feuding for generations are on the verge of open warfare. Lord Ashford, the same Leakin who threatened Carolyn in the hunt, and Lord Brennan have brought their dispute to Bradley's court as a last resort before blood is spilled. The grievance is old and complex, rooted in an insult from decades ago that's been compounded by years of retaliatory slights and injuries. Both men are powerful, proud, and utterly convinced they're right. This is a trap. Carolyn knows it immediately. Whatever decision she makes will create an enemy. If she sides with Ashford, Brennan will hate her. If she sides with Brennan, Ashford, who already wants her dead, will have justification for further action. She can't win this one through compromise. Both men want total vindication. So she changes the game. Lord Ashford. Lord Brennan, Carolyn says, her voice carrying across the hall. You've both brought legitimate grievances to this court. Injuries inflicted.
Honor damid.
Families wounded. And you both want justice, which you've defined as the other side admitting fault and submitting. Both men nod, their expressions predatory. But that's not justice, Carolyn continues. That's revenge. And revenge perpetuates the cycle that brought you here. She pauses. I'm not going to rule on who is right or wrong in conflicts that happened before I was born. That's not my place, and frankly, it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is ending this before more blood is spilled. So, you're proposing we just forget? Ashford's voice drips with contempt. No, Carolyn says. I'm proposing you redirect the energy you're spending on destroying each other towards something productive. Your families are powerful, influential. Imagine what you could accomplish if you worked together instead of against each other. Work with him. Brennan sounds scandalized. For the good of the pack, Carolyn says. There's a border region to the north that needs oversight, disputed territory between our pack and the Riverwood Alliance. It requires two families to administer jointly as a symbol of cooperation. I propose you both take that responsibility. Force you to work together. Channel your competitive instincts toward external challenges instead of internal destruction. The silence that follows is deafening. Then Bradley speaks for the first time. An elegant solution. Lord Ashford, Lord Brennan, you'll jointly administer the northern border. Report to me monthly on your progress. Prove that cooperation serves the pack better than conflict. It's a command, not a request. Both men bow, their expressions murderous, but obedient. Carolyn has made enemies of both of them. But she's also demonstrated that she won't be intimidated into making decisions based on fear of political consequences. As the gauntlet concludes, Bradley approaches her. You survived again. I did more than survive, Carolyn says quietly. I led. Yes, Bradley agrees.
You did.
Rest well. The Feast of Faces begins in 5 days. It's the most dangerous trial of all. That night, Carolyn finds another gift outside her door. A small wooden fox, carved with exquisite detail. No note this time, but the symbolism is clear. The fox survives through cleverness, through seeing dangers others miss. Someone is watching her trials with approval. Someone who wants her to succeed. But who?
And why?
The 5 days between the gauntlet and the feast pass in a blur of instruction. Isla becomes an unlikely ally, teaching Carolyn court protocol, noble lineages, and the intricate dance of political maneuvering that defines the feast. This trial is different, Isla warns. The hunt tested physical survival. The gauntlet tested leadership intelligence. The Feast of Faces tests whether you can navigate court politics without destroying yourself or the Alpha King's position. What does that mean practically? Carolyn asks. It means every noble in the realm will attend. They'll test you with conversation designed to trap you into saying something offensive, disloyal, or politically damaging. They'll offer alliances that are actually traps. They'll try to make you reveal weaknesses or biases. And every word you speak will be analyzed for opportunities to undermine Bradley's authority or your worthiness as Luna. Carolyn's stomach churns. That sounds worse than being hunted by mountain cats. It is, Isla says bluntly. Because at least with mountain cats, you know they want to kill you. At the feast, they'll smile while they sharpen their knives. The preparation becomes intensive. Carolyn learns to recognize the major noble families by sight, their alliances, their historical grudges, their current political positions. She practices responses to hypothetical provocations, learning to deflect without giving offense, to answer without revealing, to navigate conversations that are actually interrogations. Bradley joins several of these sessions, playing the role of various difficult nobles with unsettling accuracy. When he pretends to be Lady Victoria Ashford, Lord Ashford's wife and a notorious gossip, his impression is so precise that Carolyn laughs for the first time since arriving at the Citadel. "She doesn't actually sound like that," Carolyn protests. "Yes, she does," Bradley insists, maintaining the affected accent. "My dear, you simply must tell me how a human girl managed to survive the hunt. We're all just dying to know your secret." The moment is brief, but it reveals something important. Bradley isn't just testing her. He's preparing her, helping her, invested in her success in ways that go beyond political convenience. On the night before the feast, Carolyn finds another gift, a silver comb with a note that reads, "Appearances matter tomorrow, but what you see will matter more. Watch the edges, not the center." The Feast of Faces takes place in the grand ballroom of the Citadel, a space so vast it could hold hundreds of people comfortably. And it does. Nobles from every territory, dressed in silks and furs, jewels glittering in candlelight, their faces composed in expressions that reveal nothing and everything. Carolyn wears a gown of deep blue silk, simple compared to the elaborate dresses around her, but elegant in its restraint. The silver comb holds her dark hair in a style that's sophisticated without being ostentatious. She looks like someone who belongs, even if she doesn't feel it. Bradley appears at her side as she enters. He's dressed in formal regalia, black and silver, his presence commanding attention without effort. When he offers his arm, Carolyn takes it, grateful for the anchor. "Remember," he murmurs as they walk, "you're not here to win their approval. You're here to prove you can survive their scrutiny without breaking." The feast begins with formal introductions. Carolyn is presented to the assembled nobility as Carolyn Moline, candidate for Luna, under trial by ancient right. Their reactions range from polite interest to barely concealed disdain. Lady Victoria Ashford is exactly as unpleasant as Bradley's impression suggested. She approaches with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "My dear child, you must be so overwhelmed. All of this must be terribly confusing for someone of your background." The condescension is delicate but unmistakable. "It's certainly different from what I'm accustomed to," Carolyn agrees pleasantly. "Though I'm finding that politics are much the same whether you're managing a household or a kingdom, it's all about understanding what people need and finding ways to provide it." Victoria's smile tightens. "How quaint. Though surely you don't compare managing a minor estate to ruling the Leakin territories?" "I don't compare," Carolyn says. "I observe similarities. Both require resource management, conflict resolution, and the ability to see beyond surface presentations to underlying truths. The scale is different. The principles are universal." A flicker of surprise crosses Victoria's face before she schools it back to polite disdain and moves on. The next challenge comes from Lord Brennan, still angry about being assigned to work with Ashford. "Tell me, Miss Moline, what qualifies you to make decisions about centuries-old feuds you know nothing about?" "Nothing qualifies me," Carolyn says honestly, "which is why I didn't rule on the feud itself. I simply redirected energy from destruction to construction. Whether your grievances are valid isn't for me to judge. But whether continuing the conflict serves the pack, that I can evaluate objectively precisely because I have no historical investment in either side." Brennan looks like he wants to argue, but several nobles nearby are nodding thoughtfully. The evening progresses through dozens of similar exchanges. Each noble probes for weakness, testing whether Carolyn can be provoked, manipulated, or exposed as unsuitable. She deflects, redirects, and occasionally surprises them with insights that reveal she's paying attention to things they assume she wouldn't notice. But the real challenge comes from an unexpected source. A young woman approaches, beautiful, poised, wearing a gown of emerald silk that probably cost more than the Moline estate's annual income. She introduces herself as Vivian Sterling, daughter of the commander. "I have to ask," Vivian says, her voice friendly but her eyes calculating. "Don't you find it exhausting? Pretending to be something you're not?" Carolyn's instincts flare warning. This isn't a political probe, it's something more personal. "I'm not pretending," Carolyn says carefully. "Aren't you?" Vivian's smile sharpens. "You're a human girl playing at being Luna, wearing borrowed dresses, speaking carefully rehearsed lines, trying desperately not to reveal that you're completely out of your depth." She leans closer. "We all see through it. The Alpha King might be amused by you now, but novelty wears off. And when it does, you'll be back where you started, invisible, unwanted, and utterly forgettable." The words hit every insecurity Carolyn has spent weeks trying to suppress. For a moment, the careful composure she's maintained cracks. Then she remembers the note. "Watch the edges, not the center." This confrontation is a distraction. Vivian is trying to rattle her, to make her emotional and therefore vulnerable, which means something else is happening that Carolyn should be paying attention to. She lets her gaze drift past Vivian to the edges of the ballroom, where people think they're not being observed. And she sees it. Lord Ashford in quiet conversation with two nobles Carolyn recognizes as from rival packs. The conversation is intense, furtive, not the kind of casual political alliance building that defines the feast. This is something else. Something secret. "You're right," Carolyn says, returning her attention to Vivian. "I am out of my depth. This world is completely foreign to me. I don't have your training, your bloodline, or your natural grace." She pauses. "But I do have something you don't. 17 years of practice, surviving in environments designed to break me. And that's a better preparation for Luna than any amount of etiquette lessons." She walks away before Vivian can respond, moving toward Bradley with purpose. "Something's wrong," Carolyn murmurs when she reaches him. Lord Ashford is meeting with Lords Brennan and Thorne in the northeast corner. The conversation doesn't match the setting. Too intense. Too hidden. Bradley's expression doesn't change, but his eyes sharpen. "Good catch. Stay here." He moves across the ballroom with casual authority, intercepting the three lords before their conversation can conclude. Carolyn watches as Ashford's face goes pale, as Brennan and Thorne suddenly find reasons to be elsewhere. When Bradley returns, his expression is grim. "They were discussing a vote to challenge my authority, claiming that choosing you as Luna demonstrates poor judgment that disqualifies me from leadership." Carolyn's blood runs cold.
I'm sorry.
"I didn't mean to." "You just prevented a coup," Bradley interrupts, "by seeing what no one else noticed. That's exactly what I need from a Luna." The feast continues, but the mood has shifted. Word spreads quickly that Bradley uncovered a conspiracy, that the candidate Luna was the one who spotted it. The nobles who were dismissive become cautiously respectful. The ones who were hostile become wary. As the evening winds down and guests begin to depart, Carolyn feels exhaustion crashing over her like a wave.
She survived.
Again, Bradley finds her on a balcony, taking a breath of cold air away from the press of bodies and political maneuvering. "You passed," he says simply. "All 3 trials?" "All 3. Tomorrow, the council will formally vote on whether to accept you as Luna. But after tonight, the outcome isn't in doubt." Carolyn should feel triumphant. Instead, she feels uncertain. "Why did you really choose me, Bradley? And don't give me the answer about intelligence and observation. Why me specifically?" Bradley is silent for a long moment, his eyes on the forest beyond the citadel walls. Because everyone else who might be Luna comes with agendas, alliances, political baggage. They see the position as a prize to be won. You see it as a responsibility to be shouldered. That difference is everything. "I'm still going to make mistakes," Carolyn says quietly. "Yes," Bradley agrees. "But you'll make them honestly, trying to serve the pack rather than yourself. That's all I can ask." They stand in companionable silence, watching the moon rise over the shadow pine forest. Carolyn thinks about the invisible daughter who stood in shadows at the Moline estate, about the rejected sister who was offered like an afterthought, about the woman who survived by being unseen. She's been seen now, irrevocably,
Publicly.
and tomorrow she'll learn whether being seen means being destroyed or elevated. Carolyn just survived noble ladies throwing shade, prevented a literal coup by noticing things happening in corners, and got the Alpha King to admit he chose her because she's the only one who sees being Luna as work instead of a prize. This woman went from invisible household manager to political genius in like 3 weeks. If you want to see what happens when the council votes, whether the mysterious gift giver finally reveals themselves, and what fresh chaos Elizabeth's about to bring to this situation, because you know she's coming, subscribe now because we're heading into the finale, and it's going to be absolutely wild. The council vote takes place in the throne room, with the entire pack assembled as witnesses. Carolyn stands at the center of the room, alone, while 13 council members deliberate her fate. She's not allowed to speak in her own defense. The trials are meant to speak for themselves. The head counselor, an ancient Leakin named Elder Samuel, reads the formal charges. The candidate has completed the traditional trials, the hunt, the gauntlet, and the feast of faces. The council must now determine whether she has proven herself worthy to stand as Luna beside Alpha King Bradley Lynn. One by one, the council members cast their votes. The first few are affirmative, council members who are impressed by her performance or loyal enough to Bradley to support his choice regardless. Then Lord Ashford votes. I vote against. The candidate demonstrated cleverness, which is commendable, but Luna requires more than intelligence. She lacks the strength, the presence, and the bloodline necessary for the position. She is human, and therefore fundamentally insufficient. Several other council members echo similar reasoning. Not enough. Wrong bloodline. Too weak. The count reaches 6-4, 6 against. One vote remains, Elder Samuel himself, who holds the deciding vote. The room holds its breath. I have observed many candidates for Luna over my long life, Samuel says, his voice carrying despite his age. Most were beautiful. Most were strong. Most came from impeccable bloodlines. And most would have been terrible Lunas, because they saw the position as a crown to wear rather than a burden to shoulder. He looks at Carolyn, his ancient eyes sharp and knowing. This candidate saw a coup being planned in a ballroom full of distractions. She resolved conflicts not through dominance but through understanding what the people involved actually needed. She survived the hunt not through strength, but through the kind of strategic thinking that keeps packs alive when brute force fails. He pauses. She is precisely what this pack needs. My vote is affirmative. The gavel falls. 7-6. Carolyn is approved. The room erupts, half in celebration, half in outrage. Bradley rises from his throne and descends to where Carolyn stands, her legs trembling with relief and residual fear. Kneel, he says, his voice carrying authority that silences the room. Carolyn kneels. Bradley places his hands on her shoulders, and she feels the weight of pack bonds settling over her like a mantle. It's not magical, or maybe it is, she can't tell. But suddenly she's aware of hundreds of connections, threads of loyalty and responsibility linking her to the assembled pack. Rise, Luna Carolyn Lynn, Bradley says. Carolyn stands. She's no longer Moline. She's Lynn now, bound to Bradley and the pack through bonds that feel both terrifying and right. The coronation ceremony follows immediately. A crown is placed on her head, not the elaborate, jewel-encrusted thing Carolyn imagined, but a simple circlet of silver worked to resemble intertwined branches. It's beautiful in its restraint, perfectly suited to someone who survived by being invisible and leads by seeing clearly. As the pack howls in celebration, those who supported her enthusiastically, those who opposed her with grudging respect, Carolyn searches the crowd for the mysterious figure who's been leaving gifts. She finds them at the edge of the assembly. The hooded cloak is gone, revealing a woman perhaps 10 years older than Carolyn, with intelligent eyes and a small smile. When their eyes meet, the woman nods once and mouths 2 words. Well done. Then she's gone, disappearing into the crowd before Carolyn can follow. The celebration that follows is elaborate and exhausting. Carolyn is congratulated, assessed, and subtly interrogated by dozens of pack members. She maintains the careful composure she's learned, deflecting when necessary, engaging when appropriate, always watching for threats hidden in friendly faces. Late in the evening, Elizabeth appears. Carolyn's sister stands at the entrance to the Great Hall, dressed in a traveling cloak over an elegant dress, her golden hair perfect despite the journey. Jenkins is with her, looking uncomfortable and calculating by turns. The room goes silent. Bradley rises. This is unexpected. To what do we owe the honor? Jenkins steps forward, his voice carrying false warmth. We came to congratulate my daughter on her remarkable achievement, and to offer support as she begins this new chapter. Carolyn knows her father well enough to recognize the lie. He's here because Carolyn's new position represents opportunity,
Power.
resources he can exploit. How generous, Carolyn says, her voice cool. Though I seem to recall you offering Elizabeth to the Alpha King. I was the afterthought. Jenkins flinches. The assembled pack watches with avid interest. Family drama is always entertaining. That was a misunderstanding, Jenkins tries. I always knew you were capable, Carolyn. I just needed to see you prove it to yourself. It's such a transparent revision of history that several pack members laugh outright. Elizabeth, to her credit, looks genuinely uncomfortable. She approaches Carolyn directly, ignoring protocol. I owe you an apology. Carolyn blinks, surprised. For what? For being complicit in your invisibility, Elizabeth says quietly. I benefited from being the favorite, the chosen one, the daughter who mattered. I never questioned it because it served me. But watching you these past weeks, watching you succeed through actual merit rather than just existing prettily, I realize how much strength it took to survive what I put you through. She pauses.
I'm sorry.
Sincerely. It's the last thing Carolyn expected. And it's complicated because the hurt from 17 years of being invisible doesn't disappear with one apology. But it's also genuine in a way Jenkins's manipulation isn't. Thank you, Carolyn says carefully. That means more than you know. Elizabeth nods and steps back. Jenkins tries to insert himself into the reconciliation, but Bradley intervenes with chilling politeness. Mr. Moline, your daughter is now Luna of this pack. That means she's under my protection and authority, not yours. If you wish to maintain a relationship with her, you'll do so on her terms, not through manipulation or exploitation. Am I clear? Jenkins's face goes through several interesting colors before settling on pale acceptance. Perfectly clear, Your Majesty.
Good.
You're welcome to stay for the celebration tonight, but I expect you'll want to depart in the morning. Bradley's tone makes it clear this is a command, not a suggestion. After Jenkins and Elizabeth are escorted to guest quarters, Carolyn finds herself alone with Bradley on the same balcony where they stood after the feast. You handled that well, Bradley observes. I'm still processing it, Carolyn admits. Elizabeth apologizing. Jenkins being put in his place. All of it feels surreal. You've earned this, Bradley says. Every bit of it. I know you don't fully believe that yet, but you will. Carolyn looks at the man who chose her from the shadows, who saw worth in invisibility, who trusted her to survive trials designed to break most candidates. Why do I still feel like I'm pretending? Because transformation doesn't feel like triumph, Bradley says. It feels like uncertainty. You spent 17 years being invisible. Becoming visible doesn't erase that history. It just means you're learning to exist in a different way. He pauses. You'll grow into this role. You already are. They stand in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Carolyn thinks about the invisible daughter who stood in corners. About the rejected sister offered as an afterthought. About the woman who survived by being unseen.
She's Luna now. Seen.
Chosen. Elevated. But she's also still Carolyn, the watcher, the observer, the one who sees patterns others miss. That hasn't changed. It's just been given authority and recognition. And somehow, that feels right. Being Luna is nothing like Carolyn imagined, which is to say, she didn't really imagine it at all beyond surviving the trials. The reality is overwhelming. Daily councils where she's expected to contribute, political negotiations that require understanding decades of pack history, social obligations that never end, and the constant awareness that half the pack still sees her as an unworthy interloper. But there's also the work. Real work that matters. A young mother approaches Carolyn during a public audience, her eyes desperate. "My son is sick, Luna. The healers say he needs medicine from the capital, but I can't afford the journey or the cost. I don't know what to do." The old council system would have dismissed her. Not important enough, not wealthy enough, not worth the Alpha King's time. But Carolyn sees herself in this woman, desperate, powerless, dismissed. "What's your son's name?" Carolyn asks. "Thomas. He's 6. Carolyn turns to her newly appointed assistant, a sharp young woman named Claire. "Arrange transport and funds for this family to reach the capital. Have the royal healer send word ahead to ensure Thomas is seen immediately. And I want a report on why our local healers don't have the medicine available." The mother's eyes fill with tears. "Thank you. Thank you so much." After she leaves, Bradley approaches. "You're building a reputation." "For what?" "For caring about people no one else notices. It's dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Bradley's expression is serious. "Because it makes you loved by the people who matter least politically and threatens those who matter most. The nobles who benefit from the current system don't appreciate a Luna who reminds everyone that power should serve rather than rule." He's right. Carolyn can feel the pushback, subtle at first, then increasingly overt. Nobles who skip audiences where she presides. Council members who question her decisions. Whispered suggestions that the Alpha King's judgment was clouded by novelty. The resistance coalesces around a figure Carolyn hadn't identified as a threat, Lady Helena Thorne, wife of one of the council members and the social architect of noble gatherings. Helena approaches Carolyn at a formal dinner, her smile pleasant and her eyes calculating. "My dear Luna, I've been meaning to speak with you about the upcoming Harvest Festival. Traditionally, the Luna oversees the planning." "I'm aware," Carolyn says. "I've been reviewing the historical records." "How thorough?" Helena's smile tightens fractionally. "Though I hope you'll rely on those of us with experience. The festival is quite complex, and mistakes would be unfortunate." Translation: "Stay out of the way and let us handle it." "I appreciate the offer," Carolyn says. "But I'd like to be actively involved. Understanding how the festival works is part of understanding the pack." Helena's mask slips slightly. "With respect, Luna, perhaps you should focus on areas where your particular skills are more applicable. The festival requires social grace and political finesse. Are you suggesting I lack those qualities?" Carolyn's voice remains pleasant, but there's steel underneath. "I'm suggesting that your background didn't prepare you for." "My background prepared me to manage complex systems with limited resources while navigating people who underestimate me," Carolyn interrupts. "That seems directly applicable to festival planning." The exchange is witnessed by several nobles, who suddenly find their wine glasses fascinating. Helena retreats with frozen dignity, but Carolyn knows she's made an enemy. That night, the mysterious benefactor appears in person for the first time. Carolyn is in the library, researching historical festival precedents, when a woman emerges from the shadows. It's the same person from the coronation, middle-aged, intelligent eyes, dressed practically rather than ostentatiously. "You're good at making enemies," the woman observes. Carolyn's hand goes to the knife Bradley insisted she carry. "Who are you?" "Someone who wants you to succeed." The woman steps into the lamplight. My name is Nadine Frost. I was Bradley's mother's closest advisor before she died. I've been watching you since the hunt. You've been leaving gifts. Guidance, Nadine corrects. You're intelligent enough to survive, but intelligence without information is just potential. I've been providing context. Why? Because Bradley chose well, and I don't want to see you destroyed by forces you don't know exist yet. Nadine's expression hardens. There's a shadow court operating within the pack. Nobles who resent Bradley's authority and see your elevation as evidence that he's weak. Helena Thorne is part of it. So is Lord Ashford. And several others. Carolyn's blood runs cold. A conspiracy? Nothing so organized. Not yet. But they're testing, probing, looking for weaknesses. Your confrontation with Helena tonight will make you a higher priority target. Nadine pulls a leather folder from her satchel. These are profiles. People you need to watch. Alliances you need to understand. I've spent years documenting their movements. Carolyn takes the folder. Why trust me with this? Because you see patterns. You notice things. And you're not invested in protecting the status quo. Nadine pauses. Bradley needs a Luna who can operate in shadows, who understands that real power is invisible. You're that person. But you need help. And you're offering it? Why? Because I loved Bradley's mother. And I watched her die knowing the pack was being poisoned by internal politics she couldn't fight because she was too visible, too constrained by protocol. You're not constrained yet. You can do what she couldn't. Nadine's voice softens. Save this pack from itself, Carolyn. Before the Shadow Court becomes an actual threat. She's gone before Carolyn can ask more questions, disappearing into the library's darkness as silently as she arrived. Carolyn opens the folder and begins to read. What she finds is chilling. Patterns of political maneuvering, financial irregularities suggesting embezzlement, and evidence that the Shadow Court has been operating for years, slowly undermining Bradley's authority through 1,000 small erosions. She's reading evidence of treason, and she's now responsible for stopping it. The weight of being Luna settles over her like never before. This isn't about surviving trials or earning approval. This is about protecting Bradley, protecting the pack, protecting everything she's been given. This is about being the invisible daughter who sees what others miss, except now she has the authority to act on what she sees. It's terrifying. And it's exactly what Carolyn was built for. The Harvest Festival becomes Carolyn's battleground. She takes Nadine's information and begins her own investigation, using the festival planning as cover. While Helena and her allies think Carolyn is fumbling through social obligations, she's actually mapping the Shadow Court's network. Who reports to whom, who controls which resources, where the money flows. The festival itself is a week-long celebration involving elaborate banquets, ceremonial hunts, and political negotiations disguised as social gatherings. It's also the perfect opportunity for the Shadow Court to make moves while everyone is distracted by festivities. Carolyn throws herself into planning with an intensity that surprises everyone, including Bradley. She's not just organizing banquets, she's using seating arrangements to observe who talks to whom, using ceremonial roles to identify alliance patterns, using every social interaction as intelligence gathering. Helena watches with growing suspicion. You're awfully invested in this, Luna. One might think you have ulterior motives. I'm invested in understanding my pack, Carolyn says pleasantly. Is that a problem? Not at all. Helena's smile is sharp. Though I hope you're not in over your head. The first 3 days of the festival proceed smoothly. Carolyn plays her role perfectly, gracious but slightly overwhelmed, deferring to Helena on matters of protocol while actually controlling far more than anyone realizes. On the 4th day, Carolyn makes her move. She's discovered that Lord Ashford has been embezzling from pack funds for years, using festival expenses to hide fraudulent transfers. She has documentation, records that Nadine helped her obtain, cross-referenced with public ledgers to reveal discrepancies. But exposing him directly would make her a target for the entire Shadow Court. She needs to be subtle. During the grand banquet, Carolyn arranges for the PAC's head of finance to present a routine audit of festival expenses, framed as establishing baseline costs for future planning. The audit is comprehensive, thorough, and specifically designed to reveal Ashford's embezzlement without explicitly accusing him. The numbers don't lie. And when presented publicly, in front of the entire PAC, they create a scandal that Ashford can't deflect. Bradley calls for an emergency council session. Ashford is stripped of his titles pending investigation. Helena and her allies scramble to distance themselves from the exposed corruption. It's a victory, but it's also a declaration of war. That night, Carolyn receives a threat. A note left on her pillow. She doesn't know how it got past the guards. You made a mistake, little Luna. Shadows are dangerous for those who don't belong in them. Watch your back. Carolyn doesn't sleep. She sits at her window with Nadine's profiles spread before her, planning her next move. The Shadow Court won't accept this defeat quietly. They'll escalate. And Carolyn needs to be ready. The final confrontation comes during the festival's closing ceremony, a formal court session where Bradley addresses the PAC and affirms bonds of loyalty. Helena makes her move during the open forum, where any PAC member can raise grievances. Alpha King, Helena says, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. I wish to raise a concern about our Luna. The room goes silent. Bradley's expression doesn't change.
Speak.
The Luna has, with questionable authority, instigated an investigation that has damaged a respected council member's reputation. She has exceeded her role, overstepped her bounds, and demonstrated a troubling lack of respect for established hierarchy. Helena pauses for effect. I move that the council review whether she is suitable to continue as Luna. It's a direct challenge. And it's legal. Under PAC law, a Luna's position can be challenged if a majority of the council agrees. Carolyn stands, her heart pounding but her voice steady. May I respond? Please, Bradley says, his tone neutral, but his eyes sharp. Carolyn steps forward. Lady Helena accuses me of overstepping my bounds. She's correct. I did instigate an investigation. I did so because I discovered evidence of embezzlement that was harming the PAC. My role as Luna is to serve and protect this PAC. Exposing corruption serves that role. You humiliated a council member publicly, Helena counters. That's not protection. That's political maneuvering. The audit was public because transparency matters, Carolyn says. If I'd handled it privately, you'd accuse me of secret conspiracies. I chose visibility precisely because it prevents the kind of shadow court manipulation that's been operating unchecked for years. The phrase shadow court lands like a bomb. Helena's face goes pale. Carolyn continues, her voice gaining strength. I am not the perfect Luna you would have chosen. I lack bloodline, physical strength, and the social training you value. But I have something more important. I see things you've been ignoring. The suffering of PAC members too poor to matter politically. The corruption of nobles too powerful to question. The slow erosion of trust that happens when leadership serves itself rather than the people. She turns to address the full assembly. I was invisible my entire life. I survived by watching, by seeing patterns, by understanding power structures from the outside. That's not a weakness. It's exactly what this PAC needs. Someone who remembers what it's like to be powerless. Someone who leads from a place of service rather than entitlement. The crowd is absolutely silent. You can vote to remove me, Carolyn says, looking directly at Helena. But before you do, ask yourself, do you want a Luna who maintains comfortable illusions? Or one who sees uncomfortable truths and has the courage to address them? Bradley rises. The council will vote. All in favor of reviewing the Luna's position? 4 hands rise, Helena, 2 of Ashford's allies, and 1 other noble. All opposed. 9 hands rise, including 3 who Carolyn wasn't certain would support her. The motion fails, Bradley says. Luna's position is affirmed. Helena's face is a mask of controlled fury.
But she bows and retreats.
After the ceremony, as the festival concludes and guests depart, Carolyn finds herself alone with Bradley in the throne room. "You took a risk," he says. "I had to," Carolyn replies. "They were going to challenge me eventually. Better to control the timing." "You've made powerful enemies." "I already had powerful enemies. Now they know I see them." Bradley smiles, the real smile that transforms his face from stern to almost gentle. "You're becoming exactly what I hoped you'd be." "What's that?" "A Luna who leads from the shadows while standing in the light. Someone who understands that real power isn't about dominance. It's about seeing what others miss and having the courage to act on it." Carolyn looks around the throne room, the seat of power that she now shares, the authority she never imagined possessing, the responsibility that terrifies and energizes her in equal measure. "I'm still the invisible daughter," she says quietly. "I just learned that invisibility is a tool, not a weakness." "Exactly," Bradley agrees. "And that makes you more dangerous than anyone who opposed you realizes." Nadine appears from a side entrance, her timing impeccable as always. "The Shadow Court will regroup. This isn't over." "I know," Carolyn says, "but neither am I." The three of them stand together, the Alpha King, the invisible Luna, and the advisor who operates in shadows, and Carolyn realizes she's built something her father never gave her. Actual allies. Real partners. People who see her clearly and choose to stand beside her anyway. Elizabeth appears in the doorway, hesitant. "May I speak with you?" Carolyn nods, and her sister approaches. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Elizabeth says. "Going back to the estate. But I wanted to say, I'm proud of you. Genuinely. You've become something I never had the courage to be." "What's that?" "Real," Elizabeth says simply. "I've been performing my entire life. You're actually yourself. And it's powerful in ways I never understood." The reconciliation isn't complete. 17 years of being invisible don't disappear with one conversation. But it's a beginning. After Elizabeth leaves, Carolyn returns to her chambers and finds one final gift from Nadine, a mirror with a note that reads, "You were never invisible. You just needed the right light." Carolyn looks at her reflection. She sees the invisible daughter who survived 17 years in the shadows. The rejected sister who was offered as an afterthought. The woman who was chosen not despite her invisibility, but because of it. She sees the Luna who leads by seeing, who serves by understanding, who protects by watching for threats others miss. "Take the pretty one," her father had said. But the Alpha King chose the rejected one. The invisible one. The one who saw everything from the shadows and finally, impossibly, stepped into the light without losing the ability to see what others miss. And the pack, slowly, grudgingly, but genuinely, is learning that she was the right choice all along. The end. So let me get this straight. Carolyn went from the invisible daughter nobody wanted to the Luna who sees everything and terrifies corrupt nobles. In about 8 weeks, her manipulative father got publicly humiliated by an Alpha King. Her sister actually apologized and meant it. And she built a secret intelligence network with a mysterious advisor who leaves cryptic gifts like this is some kind of Leakin spy thriller? This woman literally weaponized 17 years of being ignored and turned it into a superpower. She survived assassination attempts, political coups, and Lady Helena's passive-aggressive dinner party comments with nothing but her brain and an impressive ability to notice things happening in corners while everyone else was watching the main show. And can we talk about how Bradley basically said, "I don't want a pretty politician. I want someone who can see a conspiracy forming at a party while simultaneously being insulted by nobles." That's the most specific job requirement I've ever heard. And somehow Carolyn was like, "Oh, you mean my entire personality? Say less." If you enjoyed watching intelligence absolutely destroy beauty standards, political expectations, and the entire concept of knowing your place, and if you want more stories where the underestimated ones turn out to be the most dangerous people in the room, subscribe now because we're just getting started with stories that reward the watchers, the survivors, and the ones who were always paying attention when everyone thought they weren't listening. Hit that subscribe button faster than Bradley said her and shocked an entire room of people who thought they knew how power works. But here's the real question we need to discuss. If you were Carolyn and had the choice, would you rather A. Go back to being invisible at the Moline estate where nobody bothers you. You can read in peace, and your biggest problem is Jenkins's gambling debts and Elizabeth's endless wardrobe emergencies?
Or
B. Be Luna of the most powerful Leakin pack in the realm where you have actual power and respect, but you also have to deal with Lady Helena's dinner parties, assassination attempts disguised as herbal tea, nobles who smile while plotting your downfall, and the constant pressure of people analyzing your every word for weakness? Because, honestly, some days Carolyn is probably looking at her crown like, I could be in my pajamas reading a book right now, but instead I'm exposing embezzlement conspiracies at a harvest festival. Is this an upgrade, or did I just trade one type of exhaustion for a fancier version? Drop your answer in the comments. Team Invisible Peace or Team Visible Power? Where you are watching from, and be honest, because we all know there's something deeply appealing about going back to a time when your biggest responsibility was making sure the wine glasses were polished and nobody expected you to prevent political coups before dessert.